Hey everyone, David here with a new review for The Walking Dead, and this time it is for the episode entitled Always a Cannibal, which sounds like a really ominous title for an episode of The Walking Dead. So you're pretty much sure that some shit is gonna go down, especially when you see those photos of Daryl and Sasha and Abraham finally centering around what they've been up to this entire time. Well, that's quite ironic because this week Walking Dead delivered what I consider to be one of the most feel-good episodes in a while, at least for The Walking Dead standards. I mean, we still get at least a death, and we still get some walkers. We still get a little bit of gore here and there, but by comparison, this has to be one of the cleanest episodes of The Walking Dead, and because of that, I feel like it was, despite being a couple of notches better than last week's episode, this felt like another one of those episodes that felt like it was just getting things along, getting you to watch and stay tuned to hopefully build up momentum for a potentially worthwhile mid-season finale. And that wouldn't be bad if the material inside the episode was good, which in this case, for the most part, it was. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying that the episode was bad, similar to last week's. It's just that, once again, it does feel just a tiny bit filler. In fact, there's a couple of moments where I felt like they prolonged certain shots and they were just static on something, and I was hoping for something to pop up, and sometimes it would, sometimes it doesn't. And I just felt like they put that in there because they needed to extend the running time of the episode. I mean, this time on a technical level, they literally made some filler moments to where I don't know what was up with the editor or the director, if this was their choice, but certain shots just lingered on something, and I'm like, okay, are we cutting? Oh, there, we cut. And what makes it worse is that this is the first episode since this whole plan was executed by Rick to control this horde of walkers that we actually catch up with Daryl and Abraham and Sasha. So for it to feel like that kind of episode feels slightly like a wasted opportunity. Half of the episode does deal with Daryl going through this forest that's very blackened and tarred up, and it looks like everything was burned down. And through the investigation with these people that you learn that this is actually the forest that got napalmed back in that flashback sequence with Shane and Lori in season 2, I believe. And that was a very nice little Easter egg, that a nice little connection back to the early days of The Walking Dead, that this was actually the forest that was being burned up and was napalming all those walkers around the area, and that's why there's so many dead bodies and why there's so many skeletons all over the place. And here, Daryl runs away from these people that were attacking him and Sasha on the highway in one of the most budgeted chase sequences ever. I mean, I'm not going to complain too much about that sequence because I understand that they were trying to make do with what they had, but you can kind of tell that their budget only allowed about maybe one crash into that wall, and that's it. And then beyond that, they couldn't really afford too much, so they had to rely on some camera tricks. But I'm not nitpicking that because I appreciate with what they were trying to do with that attack slash chase sequence. Now, what I did enjoy about that sequence, however, is that they didn't bother to have our characters investigate who are these people. There was no time for that. They were like, oh, we're getting attacked, we gotta get out of here. Let's get out of here first, ask questions later. So I actually appreciated the intensity of that scene by how it was approached, rather than the actual details about how well it was crafted and that kind of thing. I appreciated that. And we are led to believe that chances are those people were the wolves attacking them. It would only make sense, but we don't necessarily know, so that could be up in the air. But chances are it's the wolves, so no humongous explanation behind who was those attacks was needed. Chances are it was the exact same people that were after that the three people that Daryl meets up with later. It was more than likely the same people that were going after them. But more on that later. Right now, Daryl taking center stage was a nice change of pace. It's been a while since we've seen Daryl be Daryl, and we get more of that in this episode. We get that classic Daryl that we've been longing for quite some time. Him using his motorcycle in an effective way, using his crossbow. It was all cool and dandy. Until he meets those people. Now, don't get me wrong, at first I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. Sure, they knocked out Daryl and tied him up and treated him like a prisoner, but as time went on, I can start seeing him kind of, this guy that was leading the two girls, kind of retract, because he did give me the impression that he was a victim. He himself was, him along with the two girls, were running away from something that we as the viewer know is not Daryl. And even Daryl at one point says, I'm not who you think I am. There's some kind of a misunderstanding. And so, because of that, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I understood what they were coming from by being so defensive. I knew what they were, well, I didn't know what they were going through, but I understood it. And so, later on, when you do get those people surrounding the group of people, at one point, it almost seemed like this guy even actually dropped the Negan bomb, but he said Nealon because of his accent. He actually said Nealon. And I don't believe Negan was supposed to be that one guy that was covered in denim, even though they were obscuring his face because maybe at the time that they filmed this episode they hadn't cast Jeffrey Dean Morgan to play Negan just yet, which I'm definitely excited to see because that's the comedian right there from Watchmen. So he owned that role. I can definitely see him owning Negan. But anyways, going back to topic, I don't believe that was him. They were just trying to keep that hierarchy that is more than likely being led by Negan a secret. Or maybe this was some other group, because from what I could see through the forest, they didn't look like they were wolves, but maybe they were. I don't know. We didn't see a clear shot of their faces. But they look a little too well dressed to be wolves. And that guy who ended up getting his arm chopped off after getting bit, which was honestly, in my opinion, a little bit too convenient, that Daryl shook the bushes, and that's what would prompt the guy to walk right into the path of the walker. I thought that was just a little too contrived. But anyways, I didn't see any evidence to point that these people were wolves. Maybe it's another group, or maybe they are a division of the wolves. We'll find out in due time. For now, like I said, I appreciated that the episode didn't have to fully explain everything, and they just said, hey, there's this opposing force that is potentially more dangerous than the walkers, and Daryl and these other people need to survive it. And so through this common thread is when Daryl and these group of people kind of form this bond. They go through the forest. They go through this old house where, unfortunately, the really cute blonde girl with the pixie cut gets killed. She was so cute. Why, out of the three, she had to die? Why? She was tremendously adorable. I don't know. I tweeted it. I was like, why the hell did she have to die? That was just so bogus. But that is the world that we find ourselves in The Walking Dead. But then things went kind of to shit with these people when all of a sudden they turned heel and robbed Daryl of his most treasured signature belongings, his motorcycle and his crossbow. Damn, that hurt. For us Daryl fans, seeing him without any of those two things, Daryl, it looked naked. I mean, I'll let you, some of you people visualize that, men or women, who knows. But I mean that in the most metaphorical sense, that it did present a new side of Daryl. It's just that, again, things got wrapped up a little too quickly and a little too convenient when he finds that truck, and that leads him to Sasha and Abraham. I don't know. I was kind of hoping that maybe we'll deal with Daryl being by himself for one more episode, but then things get wrapped up rather nicely. And to add to that, these two people turning heel so quickly without even bothering to at least try to get some truth, try to get some more details out of Daryl before actually pulling out their gun on him. That was like, okay, what the hell was up with that? And that alone almost makes me wish that in the next episode we'll see their bodies somewhere getting eaten alive or something like that. But in fact, even Daryl calls it, you're gonna be sorry. Speaking of which, Sasha and Abraham, who take up the other half of the episode, are then separated by Daryl, so they are sanctioned off into this other, much more urban section of that town where they're trapped inside. Well, they're not really trapped inside this building, but they kind of hold themselves up in there because they know Daryl. They know that at some point Daryl's going to come to them rather than to risk their own hides to try to go and find him. It kind of makes more sense for them to stay put, like Sasha put it. So she did have somewhat of a point there. What I didn't like so much, though, is that I feel like they got the weaker end of the stick that was this episode as opposed to the stuff with Daryl. The stuff with Daryl was rather fascinating even after joining those people because, again, for the most part, I understood where they were coming from until they made that bullshit decision at the end to turn against Daryl and rob him of his things. With Sasha and Abraham, however, they're literally in just this one building for the entire episode, and that wouldn't be that much of a bad thing except two issues. One, is it just me, or were they both of them talking in nothing but metaphors? Like, every single line they had was a metaphor, and I'm like, guys, just just talk like normal people. I don't know, for some reason they weren't talking like normal people, and that made it kind of hard to comprehend what they were trying to do with these characters by having them reflect on the decisions that they made and whether or not they have decisions to make, period, about how whether or not if they're surrounded by people that they care about and they have some kind of sanctuary, then therefore they have choices. And that's interesting character development. I just wish I could have understood it a little bit better if they weren't talking in just metaphors, because that's all I felt like they were saying. I mean, just come forward and be straightforward about it. Write these characters like actual human people, and not like, ooh, I'm trying to be like the next Aaron Sorkin. And the other issue was that Abraham was kind of an idiot in this episode. I understand that he's going through something a little psychological where he doesn't want to leave any loose ends, because that's kind of what bit him in the ass before, especially with this whole plan that just went down and didn't go as originally planned. Whenever he sees Walker, he has to put it down because he doesn't want to risk that Walker coming back to literally bite him in the ass at night. And this is what kind of puts Sasha's viewpoint in perspective, because that's kind of where she was at towards the end of in the last season, where she was getting kind of crazy, and I was almost hoping for her to get put down because of how much of a liability she had become. And now we were kind of starting to switch roles here, where Sasha. It's almost like at one point I thought Abraham was doing all this on purpose to kind of show Sasha show Sasha how she was. In fact, there's actually a brief exchange between the two of them where he even reminds her, like, hey, you were about to lose it at one point. And now she's like, yeah, I know, you don't have to show me. I know, I'm cool now. And he's like, are we? And so I understand that the material there is just that for some reason that material made Abraham a little idiotic this week, where he was making certain things to the point where even Sasha was like, dude, you're smarter than that. Why are you doing that? And that scene with him and the walker that's trapped in that scaffolding or that fence that toppled over. First of all, how the hell did that walker get on top of that thing? And second of all, the entire time he's wrestling with that walker trying to get the RPG, I was so frustrated because right before he climbs onto that thing, I can easily see the knife on his hip. Dude, take out the knife, put the walker down, take out the RPG. Instead of going through that whole psychological thing like, Arr! Did you like my Abraham impression out there? However, I will say that I did enjoy the fact that the two kind of came to some kind of accordance by the end of the episode, where Sasha realized that she did have this mental past and now she is a little bit more collected, and now Abraham realizes that maybe he needs to appreciate the time that he has before he eventually dies, whether it be during the apocalypse or maybe should there be a cure at some point in their life, because regardless, everybody's gonna die. Everyone's gonna die. That's something that we've need to accept as we grow up in life, obviously, apocalypse or not. And Abraham kind of accepts this, but he also accepts the fact that there's some time prior to that, so maybe he should appreciate what he has in that time, and that's what he comes into terms of. And he even respects Sasha for calling on, like he even puts it, calling on his bullshit, to the point where he gives her a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge of something happening, which it's a little messed up because he does have Rosita back in Alexandria, but at the same time, considering what could have what the circumstances were within their building, to the point where they're considering that building to now be their home because they had no idea how to reach out to Daryl, whether or not Daryl was going to come back. They were just putting ideas literally up in the air. And it wasn't until the Daryl comes over with that truck that they kind of have like this look like, hey, okay, we have something to go back to. And I did appreciate that they didn't full on make Sasha and Abraham hook up within that room. I that would have felt forced. So I like that they teased the idea but didn't go through with it, and because it is human nature. But at the same time, any human would give let there be some time before making a decision like that, especially when they have other people to consider. So there's no denying that this week's episode of The Walking Dead was a couple of notches better than last week's, because in fact, I'm just going to admit it, the main reason for that is because we are catching up with characters that we hadn't seen in a long time, and when we did, they were doing some rather mundane tasks, to the point where you can even look at them and be like, yeah, I can tell these characters want to get out there and actually do something. And fortunately, out of the three, we see Daryl taking up and doing the most out of the three characters that we do catch up with in this episode. It's just a shame that it kind of wraps up a little too nicely without any humongous payoff. It was a satisfying episode, and it is a little bit of a change of pace to see characters actually make it out alive by the end of the episode. I just wish that there were certain things that would have gone down differently, especially on Sasha and Abraham's ends. So I'm still going to give Always Accountable a low 8 out of 10, which I believe was the same rating I gave last week's episode. If not, I think I gave it a high 7 out of 10. But if I did give it a low 8 out of 10, just know that this one was still a step above last week's episode. It just felt more like a little bit of the writers taking what they had intentionally planned and then stretching it because they probably underestimated how many episodes they were really having in their plate when they presented the story and said, oh, we only got like 6 or 7 episodes, so we have to take certain things and kind of stretch them out so that we can then have that big event to take up the mid-season finale and actually make it all fit. It's just a shame that some material needs to be diluted, but that's how TV tends to go, unfortunately. So let me know what you guys thought of this week's episode of The Walking Dead, and I'll see you guys next time.